December 1930, an advanced scientific camp operating deep in Antarctica under the authority of Miskatonic University ceased radio contact without warning. When a recovery party arrived, they found shattered equipment, collapsed tents, scattered notes, and the bodies of the men who had only days earlier reported a discovery that could have rewritten the history of life on Earth. The official explanation was never fully satisfying. Professor William Dyer, one of the few surviving members of the wider expedition, later described events so extraordinary that many dismissed him as delusional or traumatized beyond reliability. But that explanation may be too simple, because recently reviewed materials suggest a more troubling possibility, that Dyer may have misrepresented what happened at Lake's camp. Tonight, we reopen case file 001, the Lake Camp incident. The 1930 Miskatonic Antarctic expedition was ambitious even by the standards of its day. Led by Professor William Dyer, it combined geology, biology, atmospheric study, and deep field survey work across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. Among its most energetic members was Professor Lake, a brilliant, excitable scientist whose enthusiasm sometimes exceeded his caution. At the main camp, Dyer oversaw the broader mission, but Lake was granted authority to establish an advance camp farther west, where unusual formations had been observed from the air. Lake's team would scout, excavate, and report back. Dyer's team would maintain the main base and support operations. For a brief time, the system worked. On December 11th, communications from Lake's camp became unusually excited. Radio summaries and note fragments suggest that his team had uncovered fossilized specimens unlike anything previously known. The finds were described as ancient beyond expectation, older than projected strata should have allowed. More troubling were references to anatomy that did not correspond cleanly to any recognized evolutionary line. At first, the tone was scientific exhilaration. Lake requested additional equipment, more cutting tools, more fuel, more time. Then the language shifted. His notes, as preserved in fragmentary form, moved from confident description to fascinated fixation. One phrase appears repeatedly in later reconstructions: impossible anatomy. What exactly Lake believed he had found remains unclear. What is clear is that he no longer seemed interested merely in cataloguing specimens. He was pursuing something. Another fragment reads, "Must continue excavation." Then, abruptly, the messages stopped. There was no final distress call, no coherent weather warning, no explanation. For approximately 2 days, the main camp received nothing from Lake's position. In Antarctica, silence has many possible meanings. At first, Dyer appears to have believed the interruption might be temporary, but when contact did not resume, a recovery party was organized, and with that decision, routine expedition procedure gave way to crisis. When Dyer's recovery team reached Lake's camp, They found disorder on a scale difficult to reconcile with a simple communications failure. Tents had collapsed or been torn apart. Equipment had been scattered. Sledging gear was displaced. Some signs were consistent with storm damage. Others were not. The dead were discovered at varying points across the camp and nearby work areas. Later, summaries described violence, confusion, and a scene of partial disassembly, as though the camp had not merely been struck but disturbed. Several important records were missing. Some signs were consistent with storm damage, others were not. The organization that had characterized Lake's operation only days earlier had given way to rupture. Mixed evidence, environmental and deliberate disturbance, side by side. And somewhere inside that rupture lies the central question of this case. What happened between the moment Lake made his discovery and the moment Dyer arrived? At first glance, Dyer's later account appears straightforward. Lake's camp encountered something beyond ordinary understanding, and the survivors were caught inside its aftermath. But once the surviving materials are compared, troubling inconsistencies begin to emerge. In some retellings, environmental destruction is emphasized. In others, the focus shifts toward deliberate violence. Some summaries imply the camp was found in near-total chaos. Others suggest certain elements remained strangely intact. Most troubling are the absences. Important journal pages appear to have gone missing precisely where they might have described the final phase of Lake's work. There is no complete surviving statement from Lake, no comprehensive independent account from any member of his team. This does not prove Dyer lied, but it does mean that, as an investigator, we are forced into a narrower and more uncomfortable conclusion. Dyer is not merely a witness to the case. He is also the principal architect of its official narrative. According to Dyer, the destruction at Lake's camp was only the beginning. He later claimed that he and graduate student Danforth continued west, crossed the mountains beyond the known survey area, and discovered an ancient city buried beneath the Antarctic interior. He described architecture of impossible scale, murals unlike any human art, and evidence, as he understood it, of a civilization older than mankind itself. It is here that skepticism traditionally takes over. For many, this is the point at which Dyer becomes unreliable. And yet, dismissing his account entirely creates its own problems. Why invent such a story? Why frame it not as self-glorification, but as warning? It is possible Dyer lied. It is also possible he lied selectively, that he concealed one truth beneath another. A third possibility has received far less attention. Not that Dyer told the truth, and not that Dyer fabricated the entire affair, but that both positions are wrong. Suppose Lake discovered something genuinely impossible. Suppose that discovery destabilized the camp, intellectually, emotionally, perhaps violently. Suppose records were lost, removed, or suppressed, and suppose Dyer replaced that truth with a story so vast that no one would know which parts to believe. In that reading, Dyer is neither harmless fantasist nor simple madman. He is a survivor, a witness, and perhaps a participant in a cover-up, not to hide nothing, but to hide something specific. In the end, the Lake Camp incident remains unsolved. Professor Lake is dead. His final thoughts are missing. Danforth never provided a complete public accounting, and Dyer's testimony remains both indispensable and suspect. But if the evidence suggests anything, it is this: the official story is incomplete. Until the missing pieces are recovered, Professor Dyer will remain what he has always been, the only man who told the story, and the first man we may no longer fully trust. Case file 001 remains open. Next time, case file 002, the Danforth interviews. Recently recovered transcript fragments suggest that Danforth's version of events may not have matched Dyer's at all. If authentic, they could change everything,